The notification sound on my phone is set to the default ping, the one that comes with every iPhone, the one I've never bothered to change because I'm always too busy to care about things like that. I've heard that ping probably 10,000 times. But the one I heard on a Sunday morning in April, standing in my childhood bedroom with a half-packed overnight bag on the floor, felt different. Not because of the sound, because of what was on the screen. It was from our head of HR, candidate for Senior VP of Operations. Interview completed. Background verification returned a discrepancy. Please advise on next steps. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the dresser, zipped up my bag, and walked downstairs to where my mom was making coffee. "You ready?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." I didn't tell her about the email. I didn't tell anyone. I just got in the car and drove 40 minutes to my aunt's house, where the whole family was waiting and where I already knew, the way you sometimes just know things, that this day was going to be one I'd remember for the rest of my life. Let me back up. My name is Vera. I'm 31 years old. I run a logistics technology company called Meridian Freight Solutions. We build software that helps mid-sized trucking companies manage their dispatch, routing, and compliance in one platform. We have 43 employees, offices in 2 cities, and last year we crossed 8 figures in revenue for the first time. I did not go to college. I want to be clear about that, not because I think it makes me special, but because it is the single fact about my life that my aunt has never been able to get past. Not in 12 years. Not once. Her name is Aunt Renee. She's my dad's older sister, and she has always operated on the assumption that she is the authority on what success looks like. She has a son, my cousin Brandon, who is 2 years older than me and who has, according to Aunt Renee, done everything exactly right. 4-year university, business degree, a string of corporate jobs with increasingly impressive-sounding titles. At the time of this story, he had just been recruited for what Aunt Renee described as a major VP role at a top-tier tech firm. She had been telling everyone about it since February. It was now April. I had heard about Brandon's VP role from my mom, from my grandmother, from my dad's brother, and from a cousin on the other side of the family who lives in Portland and somehow still got the news. Aunt Renee had been calling around. She was proud. She had every right to be proud of her son. That part I never disputed. What I disputed, quietly, internally, the way I dispute most things, was the way that Brandon's success was always framed as a contrast. Not just my son did well, but my son did well. Unlike some people who threw their future away at 18, I was the some people who threw their future away at 18. I was the some people. I dropped out of community college after 1 semester. I was 19. I had been working part-time for a small freight brokerage, mostly answering phones and doing data entry, and I had noticed something. Every dispatcher in that office spent at least 2 hours a day reconciling information across 3 different systems that didn't talk to each other. It was slow, error-prone, and expensive. I thought I could fix it. I spent 8 months building a prototype in my apartment, funded by my savings from that job and a $4,000 loan from my dad. I sold the first version to that same brokerage for $800 a month. Then I sold it to their competitor. Then I hired my first employee. That was 11 years ago. Aunt Renee's position on all of this has been remarkably consistent. It wasn't a real career. It was a phase. It was risky. It was irresponsible. It was not the kind of thing a young woman should be doing instead of finishing her education. She said these things to my face exactly once, at Thanksgiving when I was 22, and then she switched to saying them to other people while I was in the room, which she seemed to believe was a meaningful distinction. My mom used to get upset about it. My dad would say, "That's just how Renee is," in the tone of voice that means, "Please don't make this a bigger thing than it is." I learned to let it go. Not because it didn't sting, it did for years, but because I eventually realized that Aunt Renee's opinion of my choices had no bearing whatsoever on the outcomes of those choices. I could either spend energy being hurt, or I could spend energy being hurt, or I could spend energy building something. I chose building. By the time I was 28, I had stopped thinking about Aunt Renee's opinion at all. I had a company to run. The gathering at her house in April was technically a spring cookout. Not a formal event, just the family getting together. About 25 people, cousins and spouses and kids running around the backyard. The kind of afternoon that should be easy. Burgers on the grill, someone's playlist on a Bluetooth speaker, conversations overlapping on the patio. I helped my mom carry a dish inside when we arrived. Aunt Renee was in the kitchen, and she hugged my mom warmly, then looked at me with the particular smile she reserves for me. The one that is technically a smile but contains within it the entire editorial position that I am a disappointment she has generously chosen not to discuss. "Vera," she said, "you look thin. Are you sleeping?" "I'm great, thanks," I said. "You look wonderful." She patted my arm and turned back to my mom. I went outside, found my dad by the grill, and spent a peaceful 40 minutes talking to him and two of my uncles about absolutely nothing important. That was fine. That was good, actually. I was in a weird headspace because of the HR email sitting on my phone, and normal conversation about the Braves' pitching rotation was exactly what I needed. Then Brandon arrived. He came in with his girlfriend. They'd been together about a year, a pleasant woman named Tara who I'd met once before, and immediately the energy of the gathering shifted. Aunt Renee materialized from the kitchen. There were hugs. There was a brief audible announcement to no one in particular that Brandon's start date at the new company had been confirmed. Several relatives congratulated him. He accepted it all with the particular grace of someone who has been told he is exceptional for so long that he has come to experience it as simply the natural order of things. I got myself a sparkling water from the cooler and sat down. My cousin Petra, her mom is my dad's other sister, and she has never had any patience for Renee's productions, came and sat next to me. "Here we go," she murmured. "It's fine," I said. "You know she's going to do the thing." "I know. You should just tell them." I looked at her. "Tell them what?" Petra gave me the look that means she thinks I'm being deliberately obtuse. "Vera." "It's a cookout," I said. "I'm not going to make it a whole thing." She shook her head and went to get a burger. She was right that Aunt Renee was going to do the thing. The thing happened about an hour in, during the lull between lunch and the point where people start saying their goodbyes. Aunt Renee had positioned herself at the center of the patio, near enough to the main cluster of adults that her voice carried easily. She was talking to my grandmother and two of my aunts by marriage about Brandon's new role. The salary, which was apparently remarkable. The title, which was Senior Vice President of Operations. The company, which I will not name here, but which I will tell you I recognized immediately, because there was an HR email about that company sitting on my phone. I kept my face neutral. "He worked so hard for this," Aunt Renee said. "This is what it looks like when you do things the right way. Education, experience, building a real resume. Not just." She paused, and in that pause she looked directly at me and then away. "Not just winging it and hoping for the best." The patio got slightly quieter. These things always create a small vacuum of silence, people noticing without wanting to acknowledge they've noticed. My grandmother, who is 83 and has perfect radar for social dynamics, said, "Vera's done very well for herself, Renee." "Oh, of course," Aunt Renee said in the tone that means, of course. And yet, I just think there's something to be said for real credentials. A real institutional foundation. Brandon will have security, stability. That's what I wanted for him. The implication being, some of us got that and some of us have a little tech thing that could disappear at any moment. I looked at my sparkling water. I thought about the HR email. I thought about the fact that I had been scheduled to be in the office on Friday to sign off on the final candidate recommendation for our senior VP of operations search, which had taken 4 months and involved evaluating 46 applicants. I thought about the fact that Brandon's full legal name, which I had seen on a resume for the first time 3 weeks ago, not recognizing it because I only knew him as Brandon, is Brandon Michael Whitmore, which matches exactly the name on the application we'd been reviewing. I thought about the background verification discrepancy. I kept my face neutral. "You're right," I said pleasantly. "Stability is really important." Aunt Renee blinked. I think she expected pushback, or silence, not agreement. "It's not for everyone," she continued, recovering. "The freelance life, the startup thing, it works out for some people, I'm sure. But Brandon wanted something with real infrastructure, real leadership." "That makes sense," I said. "What company is it?" She named it. I nodded slowly. "Great company," I said. "Really good team there." She looked at me with the expression of someone who suspects they're being condescended to, but can't quite locate the condescension. "Do you know it?" A little, I said. I excused myself to refill my water, and I went inside to the kitchen and I stood alone for about 2 minutes looking out the window at the backyard. I watched Brandon talking to my uncles. He was laughing about something. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who expected a phone call on Monday telling him he had the job. I thought about what I was going to do. The honest answer is that I had already decided. Not to say anything. Not today. I was going to go home, deal with the situation professionally on Monday, and never mention any of this at the cookout. I'm not a person who performs. I don't need the room. But then Aunt Renee came into the kitchen. She came in to refill a serving dish, and it was just the two of us for a moment, and she said, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse, "I worry about you, Vera. I always have. You're so bright. I just think you've made things harder on yourself than they needed to be." I turned around. I looked at her for a long moment. "I appreciate that," I said. And then, because I am human and I have 12 years of patience that has a finite limit, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What company did Brandon interview with?" "The VP role." She said the name again. "What was the title?" "Senior Vice President of Operations." I nodded. "I run a company called Meridian Freight Solutions. We've been looking for a senior VP of operations for about 4 months." I paused. Brandon applied. He made it to the final round. Aunt Renee stared at me. "I'm the CEO," I said. I would have been his boss. The silence in that kitchen was the loudest thing I've heard in years. She started. "Our HR team flagged a discrepancy in his background verification on Friday," I said. "I got the email this morning, actually, before I drove here." I said it gently. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was tired, and I was honest, and I was done pretending that the two of us were having a different conversation than the one we were actually having. Aunt Renee set down the serving dish. "What kind of discrepancy?" "That's between Brandon and HR," I said. "I'm not going to get into it with you, but I wanted you to know, because you've spent a long time worrying about my choices, that I have 43 employees, 2 offices, and a company that's been profitable since its 3rd year. I didn't wing it. I worked extremely hard, and I would have been very glad to have Brandon on my team if the process had gone differently." She didn't say anything. "I'm gonna go back outside," I said. "The burgers are really good. You should get one." I don't know exactly what Aunt Renee did in the next hour. I wasn't watching. I sat with Petra and my parents and we talked about nothing important, and the afternoon wound down the way these things do, with people gathering their dishes and their kids and drifting toward the driveway. Brandon found me near the cars. He looked like he'd been told something. His jaw was set in a particular way. "My mom told me," he said. "I figured she might. I didn't know it was your company." "I didn't know it was your company." "I know," I said. "I didn't know it was you until I saw the resume." He was quiet for a moment. "The background check thing." "Brandon," I said, "I'm not going to discuss that out here. If you want to talk to our HR team directly, they'll be in touch Monday." He nodded once, slowly. He looked at the ground. He was 33 years old, and he looked in that moment like someone who had been handed a story about himself that he didn't know how to carry. I felt something that surprised me. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Something closer to sadness. For him, and also, unexpectedly, for her. Aunt Renee had built her entire understanding of success around her son, and something had gone wrong in that architecture that had nothing to do with me. "For what it's worth," I said, "you made the final round. That's 4 people out of 46. You're good at what you do." He looked up. "The other thing is a separate matter," I said. "But professionally, you're capable. You should know that." He didn't thank me. He just nodded again and walked back toward the house. I watched him go, and then I turned around and found my mom standing about 10 feet away with her keys in her hand, looking at me with an expression I couldn't fully read. "I heard some of that," she said. "Yeah. Are you okay?" I thought about it. "Yeah," I said. "I actually am." She took my arm, and we walked to the car, and the April afternoon settled around us, the smell of charcoal and cut grass, someone's kid still running circles in the backyard. The regular sounds of a Sunday in the suburbs. My phone pinged. Another email, this one from our CFO, about a partnership call on Tuesday. I put my phone in my pocket and got in the car. The following Monday, our HR team completed the verification process. Brandon had listed a title and tenure at a previous employer that didn't match what the company had on record. Not a catastrophic fabrication, but a meaningful one. The kind that tells you something about a person's relationship with the truth when the stakes are high. We did not move forward with his candidacy. That decision was made by HR in consultation with our general counsel, and I signed off on it, and I would make the same call again. Aunt Renee did not call me. I didn't expect her to. My grandmother called me 3 days later to tell me that she had always known I was going to do something remarkable. She said it the way old women who have watched a lot of family history sometimes say things. Matter-of-factly, with no drama. As if she'd been waiting for the right moment to make it official. I told her I loved her. She told me to eat more. Petra texted, "I told you to tell them." I texted back, "I told you it wasn't the right moment." She sent a string of eye roll emojis. I sent one back. My dad came by my apartment on Wednesday with a box of pastries from the bakery he likes, and we sat at my kitchen table and drank coffee. And he didn't say much, but at some point he reached over and covered my hand with his and said, "I've always known. I just wanted you to know that I know." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Here's what I want to say. If any of this means something to you. I didn't build my company to prove anything to Aunt Renee. I built it because I saw a problem, and I believed I could fix it. And then I spent 11 years being right about that in 100 different ways, most of them unglamorous. There were years when I paid my employees before I paid myself. There were quarters that scared me. There were decisions I got wrong and had to reverse and had to own in front of my team and then move forward from. None of that had anything to do with my aunt. But I'll tell you something true. The 12 years of being told I was winging it, that I lacked a real foundation, that I was making things harder on myself than they needed to be, that stayed with me. Not in a way that broke me, in a way that clarified something. Every time someone told me that what I was building wasn't real, I got a little more certain that it was. The people who underestimate you quietly are inconvenient. The people who do it loudly, over and over, in front of the people you love, they're actually useful, in a way they never intend to be. I'm not going to thank Aunt Renee for that, but I'm not angry at her either. She was trying to protect her son and define success by the only map she had. I understand that. I just don't live on her map. I live on mine. And on my map, 43 people show up to work every day building something that matters, and every single one of them gets paid on time, every 2 weeks, without fail. That's all I ever wanted to build. That's enough. I've thought a lot about why Aunt Renee did what she did. Not in a bitter way, I'm past that, but in the way you turn something over when you're trying to actually understand it, not just react to it. She wasn't a cruel person. I want to say that clearly. She loved her son the way most parents love their kids, completely, and a little blindly. The problem wasn't the love. The problem was that she built her entire definition of success on a single blueprint, and when someone close to her chose a different blueprint entirely, she didn't know how to hold both things at once, so she made one of them wrong. And I was the convenient one to make wrong. That's not a moral failing unique to her. Most of us do a version of it. We find the path that worked for us, or that we believe worked, or that we were told would work, and we mistake it for the only path. It's easier than sitting with the uncertainty that there might be 10 different roads to the same destination, and that someone who took a completely different turn might get there just as surely as you did. What I know now, that I didn't fully understand at 22, is that integrity compounds. The same way interest compounds in an account you keep adding to, the choices you make consistently, quietly, when no one is watching, they add up to something. I paid my first employee on time when I could barely cover my own rent. I told a client the truth when a small lie would have been much easier. I made decisions I could defend out loud, to my team, to myself. None of that was dramatic. None of it made headlines. It just built something, slowly, that eventually became impossible to overlook. Brandon made a different kind of choice, not a catastrophic one. He wasn't a bad person either, just someone who shaded the truth when the pressure was high and the stakes felt enormous. That's a human thing to do, But choices like that have a way of surfacing at the worst possible moment, which is usually exactly when it matters most. That's not punishment in any cosmic sense, it's just consequence. Actions produce outcomes. Patterns produce results. What you build in private, your habits, your honesty, your discipline, shows up in public eventually, one way or another. The thing I keep coming back to is Petra's text. I told you to tell them. And she wasn't wrong that I could have. But I've never needed the room to know something is true. I didn't build Meridian Freight Solutions so that I could announce it at a cookout. I built it because the problem was real and the work was worth doing, and I genuinely could not imagine spending my life doing anything else. The validation, when it came, wasn't the point. It was just a byproduct of doing the actual thing. If I could say anything to a younger version of myself, standing in Aunt Renee's kitchen at 22 and hearing for the 100th time that I was making things harder than they needed to be, it would be this: keep your head down. Not because you're ashamed, but because you're focused. Let the work be loud. You don't have to be. And if someone keeps insisting that what you're building isn't real, just keep building. The real things have a way of proving themselves.